Hello everyone, my name is Shawn Hendricks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a quick presentation of using 3ds Max Design with Inventor content. And what we're going to do is first we're going to take this content and set it up for animation, and then do some simple keyframe animation on the robot arm for what you're seeing here, which is the Robocoaster. And then we're going to take this and compile it into the final coaster, get it on the track, running around the track. And in the last piece, what I'm going to do is just show you some handy script work that could be done so you can animate a sequence of camera shots around the track as the roller coaster is traveling. So let's start off with the basics. And I'll give you a few little tips on working inside of Max if you've never worked here before. I'm going to assume, though, you have a little bit of basic understanding of navigation and things like that. So in this case here, you can see we've got our scene, and I can go and I can click on any of our objects, and if I right click, I then get my right click menus, and I'm just going to pick rotate. So you can see I can rotate these objects. I could right click and pick move and do the same thing. I'll leave it on rotate though. Now the first thing to note is if you're going to do this presentation, if you're going to be playing with animating an object, you're going to want to check your axis that you're working for. So normally when you first come into the system, it'll be set to view. That's the coordinate system it's going to be set to. And you can see that if I look here, the axis is kind of off angle from the object it's on. So you're going to want to go to local, which will now use the local pivot of your objects, and that'll make it rotate in the right direction. So make sure you're always set to local on objects like this and scenes like this if you're going to be doing animation. So we've got our scene in here. Now the first problem is, as you've seen, I'm moving my objects around and absolutely nothing is happening. They're not talking to each other. You'd expect the seat to go with the robot arm, and it's not. It's because right now there's no hierarchy set. These objects have been imported from Inventor. All I've done is I've done a bunch of cleanup to weld away all the bolts and washers and nuts and things like that, because I really don't need those as separate objects. They just take up resources in the system, and I'm not animating them. So I've just attached them all to the base object, so there's really only a few objects left in the scene at this point. But I still haven't set up a hierarchy. The easiest way to set up hierarchy is first pick the child of the entire scene. So this is the last thing affected. Pick on the select and link, and I just click on that object and drag to the yellow collar. You'll see how the collar flashed white. That let me know that that's what I just linked to. So now I click on the yellow collar and drag to the arm, click on the arm, drag to the pivot, click on this, drag to the cylinder underneath it, and now I've created a base hierarchy. If I go and right click and say rotate again, now you can see when I rotate this object, the whole robot arm rotates. If I rotate this object, we get everything above that. So we've now got a hierarchy that I can animate to. Now we're ready to start talking about the animation itself. So the best way to do that is turn on auto key, and now anything I do while auto key is on will set keyframes in my frame slider. And if you're not familiar with what keyframes are, basically what you want to do is think of the way, say, classical animators like Disney animators used to animate cartoons. You'd have a primary animator who would animate what we call the keyframes. So these are key poses in the action. So if you're watching a movie that's, say, at 24 frames per second, which feature films are, the main animator might have actually drawn 1 or 2 frames in per second, which were just key main poses for whatever the character's doing. And then a junior artist or a in-betweener or tweener would then go through and draw all the frames in between from one key pose to the next. Now in this case, 3ds Max Design is our in-betweener. It's the thing that's going to do all the in-between frames, and we're the ones setting up the key poses. And that's what a keyframe is. Now, in working with this, there's a couple things you need to know about. First off is anything you do in the scene, and I'm just going to turn off auto key for a second. Anything you do in the scene, if you don't like what you're doing, don't let go of the left mouse button. Like right now, I'm using my left mouse button held to rotate this object. If I realize I don't want to do this, keep holding the left mouse button and click the right mouse button at the same time. And what it'll do is it'll send you back to whatever state your scene was in before you started turning it. It's a really quick way to do an undo when you just are trying things out to see how it looks. You'll find you want this in every product you use. Once you've used this enough inside of 3ds Max Design, it's fundamentally so useful. So we're going to turn back on auto key, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the objects that I want to animate. So in this case, I'm just going to double click, and if you double click on an object, it selects everything that's linked to it underneath, so every child of that object. So this is ultimately what we're going to be setting keyframes on. So in order to be able to pull this selection up whenever I want, I'm going to create a selection set for it. And you can see there's a dialog box up here, so I'm just going to go up there and go Robo Arm. And so now, if I deselect, so I just selected an empty space, and then I go up to selection sets and pick Robot Arm, you can see it automatically reselects everything for me. Now what I'm going to do is start to animate this, but there's a couple things to note. So let's just set the first keyframe right off the top, shall we? So I'm going to select everything because I want to set a keyframe on all of these objects, so I just double clicked on it. And I'm going to hit the Set Key button, this button right here. So even though I haven't moved anything, I've now told all those objects to have a keyframe at frame 0. And you can see frame 0 right here. Now what I want to do is set up some filtering. So sometimes I want to be able to key just an individual object. So for instance, if I go to frame 50 right now, I can go in and just pick on this one object and rotate it down. And actually let's do two objects. We'll rotate this object up so they're not dangling face down. And now what you'll see is I've got a keyframe on frame 50 on that object. I've got a keyframe on frame 50 on that object, but I don't have one on this object because I never moved it. But I may still want to have keys for all these so that I've absolutely defined what their pose will be. Quick way to do that is right now it's set to auto key selected. Well, if I change it from selected to RoboArm, so it's using that selection set we created, now anytime I hit the key button, it'll set keys on all the objects in this selection set. So while I'm sitting at frame 50, I can simply say key, and now I've got keys for everything. So you can see I can pick this object, it's got keys, this object has got keys. Last thing you might want to do is limit the number, the different things that are being keyed. So for instance, there's filters, and I can say don't key position and don't key scale or IK parameters, because I'm only really animating rotation, so I can just get rid of that. So here we've got our base first start of our animation. Now I'm going to go to frame 100, and I'm going to spin this around, and you'll see that the numbers above the object I'm rotating, it shows me the angle I'm rotating at, so I just rotated -90 degrees. Right now it's set to snap to 5-degree increments. If yours isn't snapping to 5-degree increments, just hit the letter A on your keyboard. That turns on and off angle snapping, which defaults to 5 degrees. So now I'll pick the arm, and I'm just going to spin that up, and then I'm going to pick the collar and spin that down. So I've now created a basic positioning for all my objects, and again I'm going to hit key at this frame just to make everything have that same look. So now if I just cycle back and hit play, you'll see the arm comes down, bounces up, and into the new location. Now it looks a little mechanical, and I really want to not have it just bounce at the bottom. I want to hold. So I'm going to show you a couple quick tips. So if I go down here and just select all the frames at frame 50. To do that, I'm going to select all my objects, so I make sure that all the objects I'm animated are picked. Do a little selection fence around this keyframe, and now if you hold the shift key and just drag it over, say 14 or 15 frames, and let it go, you've now duplicated all those keys. And now if I cycle back and hit play, you'll see it cycles down, holds for a bit, and then moves. So I've created what we call, bracketing of that position, so it's forcing it to stay the same for a little while. Now there's a couple other things I want to do to try and make this look right. In order to make it a little more human comfortable, what I'm going to do is do a little bit of offsetting of animation. So for instance, as this arm comes down, it would look more accurate and better if this just temporarily rotated up. It just gives it softens the movement a little bit, and just before it gets to the bottom, I'm also going to rotate it up so it looks like it has to settle into pose. So now if I hit play on this, we see it in normal time. You can see how it just softens up the move. Now I'll do the same for the pivot to the side. What I'm going to do here is simply move a few frames forward from our starting position before we start to move. So let's just say right about here. Let's just pick that object right there. And I'm just going to pivot it over. And then you can see it eases in. So now I've just softened up the overall motion like so. And at any point you can really get in and start to tweak it by pressing this button here, which opens up our mini curve editor. And now we can go in and look at the curves for any given object. So for instance, this object here. Now we can start to say, well, I want it, to ease in more just by controlling this little spline object here. So you really have a lot of control over what this is going to look like ultimately. Now I can keep animating here, and you can spend as much time as you want playing with this area, but we do have a way to kind of get past this and move on. So if I go to animation, load animation, I've actually saved out an animation for this object. So actually, before we do that, let's pick all those objects so I make sure they're selected. Go to animation. I could at this point hit save animation and save this particular set of keyframes down for later usage, but I'm just going to hit load. I'm going to load from robo arm, and I'm going to load the motion. So at this point now I have the full animation that I'm going to be using for my roller coaster run. Now we're going to go up to our layers, and I'm going to unhide the full car just so we can see we've got the whole thing here. And I can do the exact same thing. I can pick on the other robot arm, animation, load animation, robo arm. So now the two are perfectly in sync. But I don't want them perfectly in sync because this car is actually hitting the track at a different time than the first car. So you want them a little offset. So I've got all the objects of this arms picked. I'm going to select all the keyframes in the timeline, and I'm just going to shuffle them down, say 10 frames or so. Let's see what that looks like. So now you can see they're just slightly offset from each other. Maybe a little bit more. So let's do another 5 to 7 frames. And so now they're offset and doing their thing. So you can see how quickly I can get this set up. So at this point now we want to start looking at the track itself. So again, I'm going to go to my Manage Layers tool, and I'm going to unhide the components from my track. So here you can see, originally I brought in a spline shape from Inventor, but it was fairly flat, and I wanted to be able to play around with a more organic looking track that had a little more ups and downs to it. So I went and I drew out a new spline that was to the same scale, and this is going to be my overall track. Now I took in the track design from Inventor, and I used what we call a cross-section tool to pull out a slice of that track, and this is what I'm going to loft along this spline. So to do that, simply pick on the spline itself that's your track. So you should see it now says track path in the name, and then in the Create panel, Geometry, go to Standard Primitives and let that drop down, and what I want you to do is pick Compound Object. So this is any object that's built out of multiple objects. And in the Compound Objects you want to pick Loft. Now we're going to assume that the shape we first picked is the path for our loft, so instead we're going to say Get Shape, and you see as I hover my mouse over this shape it gives me this little selection icon. In this particular case I want it to flip the shape as it applies it to the loft. I just know this because I've tried it before. So I hold Control down, which will flip the shape, and I just pick it. And so with that one move we now have the beginning of a track. Now you notice the track is really kind of clunky and broken up, and that's just because we have to set some settings. So if I slide my panel down and pick on Skin Parameters, we're going to change the path steps to 25, which basically just gives more detail to the curves. If I was doing high quality rendering, I'd probably set this up higher, maybe even 100. We're also going to optimize the shapes just to make take the geometry as light as we possibly can, and we're going to turn off banking because we don't really need banking in this particular case because of the double rail. So we've now got our track set and ready to go. So now we just have to put our car on the track. So what I've done is I've set up our overall roller coaster car on a series of bones. So you can see if I move in here, and I'm just going to turn off auto key because I don't need it now. You can see I've got 3 bones. This one right here, so let's just go in and I'll just pick on that bone, and you can see, and we've got another bone selected to that and another bone here. So this bone has this bogey attached to it, or this robot arm attached to it. This bone here represents the collar, and this bone here represents this robot arm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sophisticated little controller that you don't really need to understand too much about, other than it's going to constrain this set of bones to the path that our track is built from, and then the robot arms are just going to drag along for the ride because they're linked to it, just like the way we linked the components of the arm. So I can simply go in here to Animation, IK Solvers, Spline IK Solver, and you make sure you've already got the base bone selected, and then you pick the last bone, and then you scroll over here and you'll find Track Path and click on that, and you'll see the car disappears, and that's because it's moved itself over here. And so now what I can do is I'm just again going to set myself to a local coordinate space. I can grab that one bone, and that's what I'm picking. If I select away and pick, that's the bone I'm picking, and I can now slide the car along the track. Now I could push the car all the way around the track, but that would be unwieldy. So instead, you'll notice once I assign this to the path, we opened up a new control panel area, the motion control panel. And inside of here you can see we should have position selected, and there will be a layer called a path constraint. If you scroll down just a little bit to see the settings for that, you'll see that right now we've got a percentage along the path value. So I'm going to set that back to 0. So that basically means at frame 0 we are 0% along the path. Now I turn on auto key, slide to frame 800, and say I want to be 100% along the path. And it doesn't change at all because 100% and 0% look exactly the same. But if I go back to 0 and slide it now, you can see our roller coaster scrolls all the way around the track. Now, a couple other things I want to do just to show you a little bit more control. I'm going to go and look through our camera view. So I've selected the camera, so just pick that because we're going to be working with it. And then hit C on the keyboard, and your view should change to that of the camera view. So now you're looking at the bogey, but the camera's linked to the roller coaster ride, so it's following along. Now, if you slide this for the first 50 frames or so, you'll see that it's perfectly smooth. It's dead smooth. And I don't know about you, but no roller coaster I've ever been on has been dead smooth like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it look jittery, and we're going to do that by applying noise to the position of the camera. So to do that, you need to understand controllers a little bit. So again, we're in the motion control panel, and we're looking at position. So I'm going to go and open up Assign Controller, and basically everything that animates inside of 3ds Max has to have an animation controller on it. So for instance, the position of our camera is controlled by position XYZ. Now, and make sure currently your camera is selected, so make sure it says Animation Cam up at the top. But the position of this object is controlled by a position XYZ controller, the rotation is controlled by an Euler XYZ, and then we've got a Bezier scale controller for scale. All we really care about is the position controller. So I'm going to pick that, and we're going to change it to a different type of controller. And this button here says Assign Controller. So here are all the different types of controllers you could apply to the position of a camera. We're actually going to do something really clever with 3ds Max, and that's we're going to build up a series of layers of controllers so that each one adds to the next. It's kind of like additive layers in Photoshop, for instance. So in this case, what I'm going to pick is I'm going to pick a position list. So I pick position list and say OK. And so now if I go to the next to the plus here, you'll see in my position list I have the original position XYZ controller, but I now also have an available controller. So I'm going to go to available, and again click Assign Controller, and now we're going to assign a noise control. So at this point, if I shuffle through, you can actually see now how noisy my camera is. So the camera has got its original animation, which allows it to follow around the roller coaster, but now it's also got this noise control on it that's causing it to bump. Now it's a little over the top, so what I'm going to do is take the X, Y, and Z strength, and I'm going to take them down to, say, 1, which is probably much more appropriate. I'm also going to increase the roughness to make it more staticky, and I'm going to increase the frequency so it happens more often. So now if I hit play, you can see there's just that nice subtle shake, which is much more like what you would expect on a roller coaster ride, just adds a lot of reality to it. So that's just a quick look at using controllers. At this point now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire scene and move it into the final scene where we have our full environment in place. Alright, so now we're in our final scene, and here you can see I'm in Anim Demo 02, and in this shot we've brought in a whole bunch of other objects to fill out the scene. And if I switch my camera, and the best way to do that is just hit C on the keyboard, and you should get a select camera choice. And in this case, what we're going to do is go to Opening Shot Cam. So this gives us a nice overview of the scene. Now, if you want to understand kind of what's in this scene, this is really the point at which you can talk a lot about, the power of aggregation. 3ds Max is a very powerful aggregation system when it comes to visualization. So in this scene, we obviously have the Robocoaster, which comes from Inventor. We have the tracks, which are built inside of 3ds Max themselves. We have the building, which is built inside of the building and grounds built inside of Revit and AutoCAD. Parts of the environment which are coming from Civil. The trees and cars, for instance, come from Civil data sets. And just even the things like the little people were actually originally blocks inside of AutoCAD. And the ability to aggregate all those together and then turn them into a beautiful image is really one of the powers of 3ds Max. Nowhere else can you get that same kind of in-context capabilities of showing off your product. So if you're doing, designing a car, you can really build out the entire environment around the car to truly show it off and show how it moves and how it works in action. So in this case, it's obviously the roller coaster. And what I want to do is really focus on this particular piece on setting up the cameras. So I've actually built a number of cameras here. So if I right click on the opening shot cam and go to cameras, you can see you've got a lot of different choices. I can go to, for instance, the roundabout cam, which is a totally different view. And if I slide my animation forward, you'll actually see the point at which the roller coaster zips by that. So this is one of the things you need to know about animating and visualization. As far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest mistakes novices make is they make one single camera and they animate it traveling all through an entire scene. Almost everyone does that, especially for architectural visualization. It's usually the first thing anyone does is let's just get a camera to walk down all the halls and look in all the bedrooms and wander through the kitchen and do everything. And very seldom does that work. I mean, even if you watch movies and TV, you so seldom see that kind of shot. It's usually at the point when, the horror movie stalker is chasing after someone and the camera's in the point of view of either the person running or the person chasing. So really not the impression you want to give when you're doing a nice visualization project. The way to do it is to follow exactly what movies and TV do. They actually stage a number of cameras in key locations and have them follow the action from the different angles at different times. So that you're just saying, okay, go to camera 1, now go to camera 2, now go to camera 6. And so for all intents and purposes, that's what I've done in this scene is I've gone and placed a bunch of cameras throughout the scene that are well located for certain pieces of action, and then I can edit it all together. Now the problem is I can only ever look through one camera at a time. Well, someone went and created a handy add-on to 3ds Max to fix this. And this is another one of the big powers of 3ds Max design is the large scripting and plugin community. There are literally thousands of scripts and plugins out there that you can use with 3ds Max design. One of them is the one we're about to use now, which was built by Louis Marcoux, one of our Autodesk technical specialists, and it's called a camera switcher. Now I'm going to show you quickly first how to install a script, just so you know what you're doing. So what I want you to do is open up a Windows File Explorer window, and what you want to do is go into your project folder, and under Scene Assets Scripts, you will find the camera switcher. So I'm just going to move this over, grab the camera switcher, and simply drag it into the viewport. At this point, you've installed a script. Problem is you don't see the script anywhere because it hasn't been added to the interface. So to do that, all you want to do is go to Customize, Customize User Interface, and now what I'm going to do is switch to Toolbar. So I'm going to drag a button up onto a toolbar, and under All Commands, go down, you'll see here's Louis Marcoux Tools, because it was Louis Marcoux that made the script, and just pick the camera switcher. This I can now drag to anywhere on the toolbar, so let's just say we put it right there. So there's my camera switcher, and I can just close this. So I now have a camera switcher choice. Next, if I shut down, max down, reload it, the camera switcher will now be part of my interface until I get rid of it. If you want to edit that, you can right click on it and you can edit the button appearance. In this case, I'm just going to short it down to cam switcher just so it fits inside of the button space. Oops, let's just go and do that one more time. Because I just edited the tooltip, I didn't edit the label. So let's just do that. There we go. So now we have a cam switcher. So now what cam switcher is going to do is when I run it, it goes and finds all the cameras in the scene and gives me a dialog controlling them. So let's just say cam switcher. So here's the dialog that now shows me all the various cameras. I'm going to switch to the camera that this has created because it's created a whole new camera that's going to ultimately be the animation. So I go and right click on roundabout cam. Oops. Right click on roundabout cam, cameras, camera switcher. So right now it's black because the camera's in the scene looking straight down right on the ground, so it's not seeing anything. So where do we want to start this whole thing? Well, let's just go and say we're going to start with the opening shot. So there's our opening shot for this animation. Now if I shuffle forward, and I'm waiting for the point at which the roller coaster comes out on the track. So there it is starting to come out, so let's just back up to the point just before, and now we're going to go for Start High Cam. So it jumps me over to this spot. So now the Start High Cam, I can just track further forward, and we'll wait until it just leaves frame, and then what we're going to do is go to the animation cam, which is the camera mounted on the back of the roller coaster. This is the one we created with a bit of noise on it. So I'm going to follow it through the dip. Once we get up here, now I'm going to go to my side animation cam, which will then follow me all the way through. And now it's a matter of picking where I want to come off of this. So we've gone on the dip, we're on our side animation. There's a point just as it starts to do a downward swoop. This is now where we want to do the water cam. So I'm now down here, and this camera will follow the action as it flies by. And we're going to just take it to right about there. And now we'll go to the roundabout cam, which will now catch that roller coaster zipping by. And we go just a few frames past that, and we go to the return cam, which is there for when the robot arms come back in. Just like so. And before you know it, you've got an animation finished. And at this point now, I can just kind of slide this off to the side, and you can see we've got our full sequence of shots that animates this roller coaster. Now, if you kind of screwed this up or was playing around and got a bunch of ugly shots together, I also have another camera in here called Final Camera Switcher, which is a version that I'd already saved off. So you can close down Camera Switcher, right-click on the camera name in the viewport, change cameras, go to Final Camera Switcher, and this will give you a final version that you can work with. Now, what's cool is I can actually go in as well and select the camera. So we're going to do that. So I've just hit H on the keyboard, and I'm going to turn off filtering, so nothing's selected. Then I'm just going to pick cameras. Oh, cameras, not helpers. And so now I can say all my cameras in my scene. Let's pick the Final Camera Switcher and say OK. And you can actually see all the keyframes on the track, which represent when the cuts happen. So you can see just as we hit that keyframe, boom, the cut happens. So if I decide I actually want it to happen later, I can pick that key and move it, and the cut will happen later in time. So you can fully go back later and do like non-linear editing with your camera shots before you do your final rendering. So that's just a quick look at some basic animation inside of 3ds Max. This is scraping the absolute bare tip of the surface of what you can do inside of 3ds Max and Max Design. There is so much more here. If you just feel like digging a little deeper, you'll be surprised at how many other things you can do in this system.